Hey y'all, welcome back to Rewired for Love. I'm JaCarie, therapist, trauma specialist, and someone who believes that there's a reason behind every behavior. Because around here, we don't judge behavior, we decode it. And every week, we're going to take one behavior, one relationship pattern, or one core belief that people often misunderstand. And we're going to look beyond what people do and ask a different question. And that question is, what is this behavior trying to protect? Because when we understand what's underneath it, healing starts making sense. So, today, we're decoding behavior that most people misunderstand. Actually, it's not even behavior, it's a belief, and it's a quiet one, a painful one that can follow someone for decades without them even ever putting it into words. And that belief is, I'm invisible. Or maybe for you, it sounds like I'm not important, or people don't really notice me, or a big one that I hear a lot, I don't matter unless I do something for someone else. And if you've ever carried that belief, today isn't about judging you. Today is about helping you to understand why it developed in the first place. So let's rewind that story. So I want you to picture 3 moments. Picture number 1. You're in a group conversation. Everyone's laughing and having a good time, kikiing, and then you finally decide to speak up and say something. You share a great idea, or you also say a joke that you thought was funny, and nobody responds. The conversation just keeps moving. Then, 5 minutes later, someone else says almost the exact same thing, and everyone laughs. No one even realized that you said it first. But the only thing that you do is smile and you pretend it didn't bother you. But something inside of you quietly says, see, I don't matter. Picture number 2. You're the friend who remembers birthdays. You check in, you send encouraging texts, you notice when someone seems off. You are always thinking about someone else. And then one day, you're the one struggling. You don't hear from anyone. No one asks you if you're okay, and suddenly you find yourself wondering, would anyone even notice if I disappeared for a while? Picture number 3. You're dating someone. They cancel plans. They forget something important to you. Never ask you how your day went. And when that happens to you, you tell yourself, I'm fine. I'm probably overreacting. But if you are honest with yourself, it hurts much more than it should. Not because they forgot, but because forgetting confirms something that you've secretly believed about yourself for years. And that is that I'm not important enough to remember. Now, most people would say those things are 3 different situations. I don't think they are. I think that they're connected by one invisible thread. So let's pause right there because this is the moment that most people miss. People hear these stories and immediately start labeling. You're too sensitive, you're needy, you're expecting too much from other people, you can't expect a you out of other people. And honestly, I don't think that that's what's happening. I think we're watching someone whose nervous system has learned to scan for evidence that they're unseen. And once you start looking through that lens, so many behaviors suddenly make sense because the brain's job is to remember the things that hurt deeply and try to prevent them things from ever happening again. However, when you have several experiences that continuously tell you that you're unseen, your brain starts to continuously look for those. And once you start looking through that lens, so many behaviors suddenly make sense. Maybe you overachieve, not because success is everything to you, but because achievement was the only time that people noticed you. Maybe you're a caretaker, the one who makes sure everyone else feels loved, because somewhere inside for you, you're hoping someone will finally do the same for you. Maybe you're the over explainer. Maybe you interpret because you're afraid that you won't get another chance to speak. Or maybe you become the funniest person in the room. Maybe you become the quietest. Maybe you're constantly trying to prove yourself. Or maybe you're constantly apologizing. When you think of all of those behaviors alone by themselves, they look completely different on the outside. But underneath, they're solving the exact same problem. And they're asking, can someone please see me? So now let's ask the question we always ask on this podcast. What is the behavior protecting? Here's something I wish more people understood. Children don't wake up one morning and decide, I'm invisible. Beliefs are learned. And sometimes a child grows up with caregivers who are overwhelmed, who are not intentionally neglectful, they're just exhausted. Maybe they work multiple jobs, they're managing their own trauma, and they're trying to survive on their own. The child doesn't understand adult stress. And to be quite frank, children only look at situations from their lens as if they did something wrong. What they do is their system just simply notices. And what they notice is no one notices when I'm hurting. And sometimes attention only comes when they perform. Good grades, sports, being helpful, being the easy child, being successful, being perfect. And other children, maybe they grew up in homes where siblings required more attention because of illness, because of behavior concerns, or even family crises. And again, it's not about blame. It's about what the child's nervous system learns. Because children don't question their caregivers, they question themselves. They don't think, my parents were emotionally unavailable. They think, maybe I'm just not important enough. That belief becomes a filter. And once a belief becomes a filter, your brain starts collecting evidence to support it. So every forgotten birthday, every unanswered text, every interruption, every canceled plans, every moment someone doesn't notice, your brain quietly says, see, I told you. But here's the part that changes everything. The behavior isn't the problem. The behavior is always protection. If I believe I'm invisible, I might become indispensable. If I believe I'm unimportant, I might become perfect. Or if I believe nobody notices me, I might make sure that everyone else feels noticed. And it's not because that's who I am, but that's how I learned to survive. That's how I learned how to survive relationships. When you see it that way, the behavior stops looking irrational and it starts looking incredibly intelligent. So now I want to bring this back to you. Not the movie, not the story, you. How does I'm invisible show up in your life? Do you work harder than everyone else, hoping that someone will finally recognize your effort? Do you secretly feel disappointed when nobody thanks you? Do you stay quiet because you assume your opinion won't matter anyway? Or maybe you become louder because being overlooked feels unbearable. Notice, those are opposite behaviors, but they're protecting the same wound. And here's another question I want you to sit with. When was the first time you remember feeling unseen? You don't have to solve it today. Just get curious because curiosity creates compassion and compassion creates healing. So here's what I'd love for you to practice this week. Not homework, just awareness. When you notice yourself asking, does anyone ever notice me? I want you to pause, take one slow breath, and ask yourself, what part of me is needing to be seen right now? Not what is wrong with me, not why am I so sensitive, but instead, what part of me has been carrying this belief for a very long time? Because sometimes healing isn't found in just getting more attention. Sometimes it's found in finally noticing ourselves. So before we end today, I want you to remember something. Feeling invisible doesn't always come from people ignoring you. Sometimes it comes from years of believing your needs weren't important enough to matter. But beliefs are not facts. They're stories your nervous system created to help you to make sense of your world. And stories, the good thing is, they can be rewritten. So, if today's episode made you feel seen, would you do me a favor? Share this episode with someone who has ever wondered why they work so hard to earn love, to earn recognition, or just to have a feeling of belonging. Because chances are they're not looking for attention, they're looking for evidence that they matter. And as always, thank you for spending this time with me. And remember, your behavior isn't random, it's adaptive. And when you understand what it's protecting, healing becomes possible. I'll see you next time on Rewired for Love. And until then, keep rewiring with compassion.